Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the film Moana 2, and in the second half, I'll be reviewing the film Spellbound. So starting off with Moana 2, this is a new film from Disney Animation. The first Moana came out 8 years ago already, if you can believe it, which is crazy how much time flies. But I really like that movie. It's a lot of fun, the music's great, characters are enjoyable, and it's beautifully animated. In general, I really like Disney Animation, and Moana is one of their better movies in a while. Really, really strong film. And it's the most streamed movie over the past 5 years. It's equivalent to nearly 45 billion minutes of streaming. So that's a ridiculous amount of time people are watching this movie. And so obviously you can only imagine why Disney would want to make another one. But here's the thing. This sequel wasn't really made to be a direct sequel to the first Moana. Initially, this movie was set out to be a series for Disney+, but as streaming has become less important and essential for studios, and Disney has realized how important theatrical releases are over the years, because really what ended up happening is a lot of the studios were betting on streaming, they were banking all their money on it, spending billions a year. And, obviously what kind of ended up happening is they're not really making much investment back because streaming, you can't get that much revenue. And also, people don't really talk about content on streaming as much as when they see something in theaters. So, as Disney's kind of, like a lot of other studios, they've kind of realized streaming isn't that, important. What's really important is getting people talking about the movie in theaters, because when you have a theatrical run, your movie gets talked about in the theater, then it has a second life on streaming and DVD and all that other stuff. So it just kind of made more sense to put this in theaters. But anyway, as Disney realized how important theatrical releases are, as well as seeing how valuable Moana is to their brand because of how many people have been streaming it over the past few years, they decided to shift the show to become a movie. But here's the other thing. I wouldn't mind this if they decided to change, the whole thing early on in the process and basically make it a movie from the start. Like, if they just, started developing this as a TV show, and then, before they even really started making it, we're like, all right, let's change it. Let's make it a movie. I would be fine with that. But they didn't do that. It's clear as day to me that Disney took a half-baked TV show that was, well in development already and just cut out a bunch of stuff until it became short and lean enough to become a movie. It's really obvious to me. It's not... I've heard some people say it's not that clear. Some people have said, it doesn't really show that it was a TV show. To me, it really did. But it just has a lot of elements that feel kind of half-baked. And also, Moana 2 is also outsourced for the animation, meaning that it wasn't entirely done in-house like a lot of other Disney animated movies. A lot of them in the past have been done entirely at Disney Animation Studios. I'm actually watching a documentary right now that was released a while back on Frozen 2 and how that was made and the whole process. I feel like this is, Moana 2 has a pretty similar story of just, how much chaos went into making that thing, but... in this case, Moana 2 was actually outsourced to I think a Canadian company, so it was animated in Canada a little bit. I'm not sure to what extent, because, things changed along the way to become a movie, so maybe they did some in-house also. But really, you can tell there's not a consistent vision here, because this movie has not one, not two, but 3 listed directors. You have a lot of people, people's names on the screen, and you can't really tell who was actually in charge. I'm sure because some of them did separate episodes of the show, and now they're just kind of all merging together. But, so, all of that, along with the change in the songwriters, which I'll get to in a bit, made me very skeptical in how this would be. I did have hope, though, because the writers are actually the same as the first movie. The core writers of the screenwriters, they're the same. The cast is back too, and the trailers look pretty good. I was very pleasantly surprised with how the trailers look. I was like, alright, this actually could be pretty good. But to answer the question now, is Moana 2 a good movie? I have to say no. It's actually everything I feared it would be, but that doesn't mean it's awful. Let me explain. So, I don't think the movie being bad would have been the worst thing that could happen to it. And you might be like, what? How? Really, the worst thing a movie can be, to me, is mediocre. or one of the worst things it could be is mediocre. I mean, there are so many other bad things too, but mediocre is like the enemy of everything. It's just, it's forgettable. It's just not good or bad. It's just something that you just toss away. It goes in one ear and out the other. There's really almost nothing to talk about or discuss with this movie that's interesting. Like, it's just a lot of nothing. And that's my reaction walking out of this movie. I was like, well, that just, that happened. I watched a movie, and I'm not going to think about it again. So that kind of sucks, because I really like the first Moana, and I could see that they had things to do here, but, like, this could have been so much better if they just really put the effort in from the start. I mean, maybe as a show, like, this movie has, like, a very weird thing going on, because it could have been a show, and it might have actually been better as a show, because it would have more time to develop, more time to explore certain things, but also, it's like, as a movie, it's more lean, it probably focuses on the core characters more. I don't really know which way this movie would have turned out better. I'd have to see it as a show, obviously, to really say that, but I just feel like this is a weird middle ground that wasn't supposed to happen, and now the movie's in a weird place. But, with all that being said, there are a few good elements here. The animation still looks nice, and I liked returning to this world again. I also saw the movie in 3D, which made things pop even more. I actually would recommend seeing it in 3D if you do go see it. That kind of added a little bit of depth and just kind of pop-outs to everything, so I just thought it, made the experience more fun. And the cast here is good again. Nobody misses a beat. Everyone's just as good as they were last time. Even though it's been so long, it's like the characters only aged a little bit, but everyone acts just as you want them to. There are also a few fun set pieces that showcase some nice action, especially in the third act, which I think is easily the best part of the movie. It has a lot of fun stuff in it, and it feels like it's just the most interesting. Like, there's more stakes in it, there's, kind of the characters you want to interact are interacting more. It just has a lot more stuff that the first two acts didn't have. And not that it's great or anything, but it's by far the best part of the movie. There are also a few good jokes here and there. There were a few times I actually did get a nice chuckle. Loto and Kele are fun side characters and nice additions to the movie. One is kind of like this Australian girl who's just like, testing a lot of things on the boat and just, trying out a bunch of different stuff. And the other guy, Kele, is, this old guy who's just miserable and doesn't want to be there. And, it's like your Squidward character. It's just like, he's just fun being miserable. I just enjoy that. It's a fun character to always have when everyone else is so upbeat. There's a nice moment with him where, like, he's thinking, like, everyone on the ship is going crazy, and they're all just singing, and it's, like, it's kind of funny. That bit made me laugh. But really, that's kind of where my positives with the movie end. I mean, because onto my issues, the story is a total mess. It's about needing to find ancestors so Moana and the people on her island can find others out there, but there's something preventing them because another island disappeared. Something, I don't know. Honestly, I'm so confused about what it all meant, and it wasn't really clear to me. I found it very just confusing and hard to follow in some ways. I feel like, again, that's kind of like a Frozen 2 thing where I feel like the people making it didn't even really know what they needed it to be, so they just kind of have this random explanation thrown in there. I didn't really get it. I thought it was weird. I don't know. Didn't really work for me. Additionally, the characters aren't developed much this time around. They really don't have character arcs. A lot of them are just there to serve the story. But, a good movie has the story serve the characters, not the other way around. And that's really my biggest issue with this movie, because the characters are so likable in the first movie. You have Moana and Maui. They're really interesting in the first movie. They each have, like, an arc to go through. In this one, it's like, what is it? Moana, like, she just kind of wants to go out and explore more. That's really her thing. And Maui, The Rock says his arc in the movie is, like, asking for help. I'm like, that was, like, a 2-minute thing. Like, that wasn't even really serious. It was just kind of a one-off joke. I don't know. No one really has any character arcs here. It's just, there's nothing to talk about with the characters, and that's really frustrating. And I didn't like that. So, there's that. And then there's also a big villain problem. The movie sets up a threat, and then keeps changing its mind. I was just really disappointed because, like, not that there was really a villain per se in the first movie, like there wasn't like a real baddie, but there was a threat in the first one. This one, they have a real villain kind of set up, and then they do something with the villain later that's just like, what? What are you doing? Like, what happened here? That's where I'm like saying this is really obvious it was a show, because you had this very clear setup and there's something missing. Like, there's very clearly like an episode of the show missing where we find out some piece of information and we learn more about the characters that's not there. It just feels like everything was stripped away and they just left the basic essentials to tell a story but not actually, convey anything about the characters. And that was really frustrating because the real villain of this movie, you barely even really get to know them. Like, and it just, I don't know. I didn't like that. The songs are also very disappointing. They didn't get Lin-Manuel Miranda back. I don't know why. I don't know if maybe it was just too much money or, they didn't really have much faith in this project as a show. In any case, he's doing the Lion King movie Mufasa coming out in a few weeks. But they got the songwriters of Mexican Pizza, the musical, for this movie. And while the music isn't abysmal or anything like that, even the best songs are only a fraction as good as the ones in the original. Like, How Far I'll Go, Shiny, You're Welcome, all those songs, great songs in the original. This movie, the best songs are, one of them is Beyond, a song by Moana that's kind of rivaling How Far I'll Go, but not nearly as good. And Maui's song, Can I Get a Chi-Hu? It's not nearly as good as You're Welcome, but they're catchy. They're catchy enough. Another thing is the movie feels like a huge setup for Moana 3, or I guess if it was a show, it would have been a setup for Moana 2, which is really why it also feels like a show to me. It doesn't have enough of a large-scale story or essential adventure to be worthy of a feature film, so it feels more like a spin-off show for a bunch of the crew members in this movie, like I mentioned before, some of the side characters, that was just reworked for time, and now happens to be a Moana sequel. Like, they just gave all the screen time to Moana now that was supposed to be, she was probably a side character in the show, but now she's the protagonist in this movie, and I think the film makes a big mistake with not having much time with Moana and Maui together. They are, to me, the heart of the first film, beyond the music, and they only have a small amount of time together relative to what you'd expect. I don't know. Overall, it's an inoffensive movie. Nobody's going to hate it or anything, but I think it's easily an inferior sequel that promises better things ahead in the future. It doesn't even really feel like a Disney Animation Studios movie. Like, they're known for quality a lot of the time. I mean, they've had a little bit of a low streak lately between Strange World and Wish, but this really just did not feel like the magic I know in the first Moana, not even close. So I'm going to give it a C. I really don't think it's worth checking out, at least in theaters. I mean, if you want to watch it on Disney Plus as it was initially intended, go ahead. This movie's making a ton of money, though. I mean, Moana is a huge character for people, and I don't know. I mean, maybe you'll like it if if you love the first one and you just want to watch these characters again. You might get some enjoyment out of it. If you don't care about the story that much, you'll probably enjoy it. For me, this was just very disappointing, though. I did not like it. Alright, and next up is the movie Spellbound, a new animated film on Netflix from Skydance Animation. They did the movie Luck for Apple TV Plus a few years ago, and it wasn't great. But I was still excited for this because the studio has so much potential to be great. The infamous John Lasseter is the head of animation. He was the chief creative officer at Disney and Pixar many, many years ago. He's the mastermind behind stuff like Toy Story and Cars. He's produced a ton of movies you know and love, like Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph, Monsters, Inc., Frozen, Zootopia, and many more. Unfortunately, he was fired from Disney due to sexual misconduct, and years later joined Skydance Animation. And say what you want about the man morally, he was no doubt inappropriate, but he is a creative genius, and I was still very curious to see what he would come up with, because a lot of his movies are very good, even if I don't really respect the man himself. In any case, Spellbound comes around, and I had a lot of hope despite being disappointed by Luck. I really thought this movie could be good. because it is helmed by the co-director of Shrek, has a lot of big names in the cast, and some others behind the scenes that are pretty notable. The movie is about a princess whose parents are transformed into monsters, and she has to maintain order while traveling into a dark forest to break the spell. And look, maybe it doesn't sound too groundbreaking on paper. You probably, heard this kind of plot so many times before. But knowing the people involved, I knew there was something more here. Like, I knew there was something maybe they weren't telling us that was behind the movie. And of course there is. But before I get to that, this movie's bad. Like, I have a lot of pet peeves in movies, but my biggest is wasting potential. The movie is really a tale about a young girl who is struggling to cope with her parents' divorce. Her parents are quite literally acting like monsters and children, and really all of the weight of the world is put on the shoulders of this little girl, and she's trying to keep her family together and wants to return back to a time where things were normal and they were all happy together. And if that sounds enticing, it's because it is. It's a great idea in my opinion. I think it has very mature subject matter and ideas that rival something you'd see from Pixar, but beyond a few strong scenes, it's a very poorly executed movie. It plays everything off as so generic. You've seen it many times before. Just this type of movie, like the humor and just the way the story goes. Like, you've seen it all before. And it follows all the usual tropes, has pretty lame characters, none of them are very interesting, and isn't funny. It's a movie that tries to emulate the Pixar formula very much so, but ends up feeling like a ripoff in a lot of ways. The songs are mostly just okay. A few do stand out, and I'll get to that in a bit, but a lot of them don't really stand out in any way. A lot of them were just kind of forgettable, similar to Moana, just a lot of songs that, I just don't want to listen to again. But really, the big weak point of this movie is the writing. It takes all these potentially riveting ideas and doesn't really do much with them. It's far more kiddie than it needed to be, and that kind of contradicts the mature messages this movie is trying to get across. I think the direction is also to blame here. Vicky Jensen helms the film. She did Shrek and also Shark Tale, which the latter is not a great movie. One is far better. And there are a lot of times where the message isn't communicated well unless it's directly stated at us. There are a lot of cringy scenes in the movie. It reminds me of when the Shrek 2 director did Romeo and Juliet, just like in the way it's like you started off with something really strong, and I don't know how you ended up here with this really bland, totally generic kids movie. But I do have a few positives to note here. I have a few things that I do really like. And besides the main themes of the movie, which I discussed, and I really do like those, I think they're pretty great. I really do like the cast here as well. You have so many great people in the cast. You have Rachel Zegler, John Lithgow, Nicole Kidman, Javier Bardem, Jennifer Lewis, Nathan Lane. Another thing is a couple of songs I enjoyed. I should note Alan Menken does the score. He did stuff like Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Tangled, Hercules. You know all those songs, and like he's like the mastermind of music for Disney. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this movie has a ton of notable people. The cast is really good. Like, everyone's trying in the cast. Rachel Zegler especially. Her voice is fantastic here for the music. And even, like, Nicole Kidman, like, is a great singer as seen in Moulin Rouge. But, you know Alan Menken's music from so much. I mean, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, they're all so iconic for their music. And I don't know what happened here. The music just isn't that good a lot of the time, but there are a few songs I want to note that are genuinely great. The main one is The Way It Was Before. That song is really, really good. I actually wouldn't be shocked if it was nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars. I don't think it will be. I don't think this movie's getting nominated for anything, but I wouldn't be shocked if it is. And the other song is My Parents Are Monsters. Both of these songs just do a really good job at communicating information about the characters, and they're also very well written songs too. So I really do like those songs in particular, even though the rest are pretty mediocre at best. I also think the film has decent creature designs. The movie has to do a lot with the monsters by instilling this humanity in them while showing their wild side too. Like, because they are this girl's parents, you have to show that they maybe aren't in control of themselves, but you also have to still like show this humanity there so we can tell it's still them behind these faces. And it has a nice balance and was effective. I did feel that it communicated that well. The animation as a whole isn't great, but I do think the creature designs worked. But look, as a whole, this is a movie that doesn't work and is generally pretty bad. As I said, it's pretty cringy, the writing isn't very good, but it has these moments of greatness where you see what could have been and what the creative team was striving towards. And I think that would have been an awesome movie. I really do. Something that's a huge pet peeve of mine is having like these great ideas with just squandered potential. That's kind of what this movie is. And it's really frustrating because of that. Because I think if Disney or Pixar or even DreamWorks, some other company, had gotten their hands on this movie and, you just got a better creative team, better directors, writers, crew behind it, I think it could have been a home run and something very, very special. But alas, as it is, it's a swing and a miss. So I'm going to give it a C minus. It's pretty bad. I don't recommend watching it, but I think, if they were to ever try to do something similar with this kind of idea in the future, it could be a good movie. But that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.